All right, guys, in this video, we're going to be looking at the scope planning system and how to use it specifically to support quitting porn. And no, you'll need to have already gone through the exercise of setting up your first scope to get the most out of this video. So let's go ahead and get into it. All right. The real purpose of the scope method in the long-term context of a porn reboot is not just productivity or realizing your ambitions. It's about methodically creating a life that you do not feel the need to escape from in the first place. When scope is set up properly, progress on it reduces emotional triggers, increases overall satisfaction, and fills the gaps that normally create emotional cravings for porn. And as we've said, those emotional cravings, those are the real big sticking point for most guys. If you do this well, quitting porn becomes dramatically easier. In fact, if you've ever white-knuckled your way through a reboot, made it a decent stretch, and then slid back into porn later, there's a very good chance that this is the piece that you were missing. Because, as we've said many times, if you remove porn but leave your life exactly the same, then all you're really doing is trapping yourself in the same pain points, only without the coping mechanism. Eventually, something gives. So before we move further, I want to say something important here. What we're going to be doing is taking the first draft of the scope that you've already made and refining it so that it better supports your goal of quitting porn. Now, some guys get a little annoyed when they hear that they need to adjust their plan, and I would strongly encourage you to not look at it that way, okay? Ernest Hemingway, all right, he's a famous writer, and he said that writing is rewriting. All right. And the point is that meaningful creative work improves through iteration, not perfection on the first pass. Planning works the same way. As you move forward, you gain new information, new experiences, and better insight into what you actually need. Okay. So your plan must evolve with you. So don't resist iteration. Embrace it. Okay. We got to embrace iteration here. And, the stuff you're going to write down now, you're probably going to tweak later. So what we're going to do now is we're going to cover the 5 major considerations that are critical when mapping out a strong, realistic path toward a porn-free life. And these are the things that you're going to feed into your scope plan and adjust it. So the first thing you need to understand is how to choose quarterly goals that actually support quitting porn. Because those quarterly goals, those are the big drivers. Those are the biggest thing that we're latching onto and trying to actually implement. And the answer for getting this right is to simply focus on whatever has the biggest impact on your primary emotional triggers. All right. We want to try and solve these big emotional triggers, or at the very least, make them far more manageable. So if work stress is a major trigger for you, then one of your quarterly goals should be directly addressing that, which might mean improving your productivity or changing roles, maybe finding a better job or developing a better stress management strategy. Okay. If loneliness is a major trigger for you, then you might be focusing on building friendships, reconnecting with family, or increasing regular social contact. If boredom and scrolling are your triggers, then your goal likely needs to involve developing healthier hobbies and genuinely satisfying ways to fill your time. But the key shift here is that when quitting porn, your quarterly goals don't always need to be about lofty future milestones. Often the most effective goals are the ones that fix obvious recurring problems in your day-to-day life. Like, I'll sometimes see guys obsessing over what business they should start or what niche they should pursue, while their current lifestyle consists of eating Hot Pockets and staring at a screen for 14 hours a day. Like, you got to take care of what actually is affecting you first. So like in Jordan Peterson terms, clean your room before you try and change the world. Or in medical terms, fix your bleeding neck wound before worrying about your 1-rep bench press max. So once you start choosing goals that address these emotional triggers, the next thing we have to really think about is energy management. Because quitting porn is already a very energy-intensive process. You're dealing with cravings, you're dealing with neurological changes, emotional regulation, you might have some withdrawal, and you're gonna have to implement new behaviors. And you're working this whole system, right? So that alone already puts a pretty significant load on your system. So what you got to do is strike a balance between progress and energy conservation. All right. Because if you make too little progress, your life remains unsatisfying in the same old ways, and porn eventually creeps back in to fill the gaps. But if you try and change too much at once, you will overload yourself, spike stress, and increase the urge to escape. Quitting porn is already a major life overhaul. So because of that, I strongly recommend avoiding other major life overhauls during this process, especially in either extreme. All right. So on the easy extreme, if work stress is a trigger, don't take 3 months off quit porn while everything is artificially easy, then expect your sobriety to hold once real life resumes. Even if you hit 90 days while sitting on the beach, your foundation will likely be too weak to survive your normal life. On the other extreme, if body insecurity is a trigger, you don't like your fitness and you've been sedentary for years, don't decide that this is the moment to train for a bodybuilding competition, completely overhaul your diet, and work out 3 hours a day, all right? That level of stress is almost guaranteed to backfire. Instead, move toward the middle, all right? Maybe you reduce your overtime. Maybe you shave back your hours. Maybe you start training a few days a week and make gradual dietary changes, all right? These are excellent moves when done with maturity rather than drama. And while both extremes are bad, honestly, most of you are far more likely to overdo it than underdo it. So here is an important reframe. If for the next 90 days, you need to slow down or even temporarily regress in some areas to free up enough energy to quit porn, that is still a massive step forward. 3 months of strategic restraint in exchange for resetting your brain and ditching a lifelong bad habit is an incredible trade. Own that trade. So this brings us to our next major point. Have fun on purpose. Because for many guys, porn combined with scrolling or gaming has become the default outlet for pleasure. When free time appears, that's where they automatically go. In fact, a lot of guys I work with have no idea what they do for fun outside of those behaviors. And that is a serious problem, especially when you remember that pleasure is a core appetite that we are concerned with. A lot of times when guys enter self-improvement mode, they often try to channel all of their energy into progress and discipline, turning themselves into productivity machines. But the appetite for pleasure doesn't just disappear when you do that. If you don't intentionally decide how you're going to enjoy yourself, your brain will default to porn and other low-value escapes on autopilot once you've used up your energy for the day. It's like, I'm going to grind all day. You grind and you grind and you grind, and all of a sudden you can't work anymore, and you didn't plan any downtime, and guess what? You've reached for porn. In fact, some of the biggest breakthroughs I've seen with clients who were already productive came when they learned to relax their grip, accept their current progress, and intentionally plan how they would unwind and enjoy themselves. Highly self-improvement oriented guys often struggle here. They'll try and sneak productivity into their fun. They'll say they'll read, but only if it's dense philosophy or, Greek mythology or other kinds of technical material or whatever. Don't do that. Don't try and covertly turn your fun into productivity. Let it be fun, which means that it's enjoyable for its own sake. Because when it comes to fun, the only criteria that actually matters are whether something feels interesting, enjoyable, and guilt-free afterward. The recommendation I often give guys is follow the sensation of, I think that's cool, and do those things. And this leads directly to the next point. Plan your downtime. All right? Because unstructured free time is a killer for a lot of people. And if it's a killer for you, then you should always have a basic plan for your evenings and weekends. And this doesn't need to be rigid. You just need an idea of what you actually want to be doing. That way, when a craving hits and you run the 3 questions, you already know what you want to do instead of reaching for porn. And so the core scope method already includes planning at least one fun thing per week. But when you're quitting porn, many guys benefit from planning out their fun daily. Even something as simple as pre-selecting a podcast or audiobook or some show for the evening can dramatically reduce mindless scrolling that escalates into porn. Other guys might need to take this a little bit further and actually rediscover or connect with hobbies again. They need to figure out what the heck they're passionate about again. You don't need to worry if this stuff isn't immediately obvious. Just start playing with it. Start exploring it. Start figuring out what the heck you like to do. And in this vein, we got to talk about weekends because weekends are especially dangerous for a lot of guys. And that's why with a lot of my one-on-one clients, I will have them literally send me their weekend plans in advance. And these plans, they'll usually include a little bit of productivity if they got some chores or whatever to get done. But then it has just kind of a rough outline of the fun and relaxation that they're going to be having. Maybe it's, watching the game with some friends or spending time with family or going for a walk or a hike or some event or whatever. The point is that when downtime is filled intentionally, porn loses much of its leverage over you. So with all that being said, time for our final point where we're going to be shifting gears a little bit and we're going to be talking about relationships, okay? Because we need to talk in particular about romantic relationship goals and how you must make sure that these kind of goals work for you rather than against you. Because for many guys, romantic loneliness is a major trigger and they might be putting some kind of relationship goal on their scope. And the right approach really depends on the individual. So for single guys doing a hard mode full abstinence reboot, there are generally 3 viable paths. Path 1 is focusing on improving other areas of your life that make dating easier later, and then just generally avoiding dating while you're rebooting. Okay, this is nice if you just don't want to think about that stuff. Just get yourself clean from porn and then move on to connecting with people after the fact. Option number 2 is to focus on building out your social connections without actively pursuing dating, because dating is 10 times easier when you're already socially connected and active. So it feels like you're kind of working toward dating without the pressure of actually doing it. And then option number 3 is to actually date while you're rebooting, just abstaining from sex. From what I've found, some guys simply cannot quit porn while dating because of the potential for rejection, maybe the triggeringness of the dating apps, and then you got the sexual and emotional stimulation involved, okay? Like if you're one of these kind of guys, if you get rejected by a girl and you relapse, or, when you swipe through your dating app, you get triggered, okay? Like just maybe you're better off not dating while quitting porn. However, other guys cannot quit porn while denying their desire for a relationship. Like for guys like this, they put off relationships for so long already, and this part inside of them that wants a relationship, this true emotional desire, is just so hungry for it that if they reject it any longer, that part's going to revolt, flip the table, and maybe end up trying to reach for porn. So if you're in that kind of situation, well, maybe you got to actually go out and start talking to some girls. Got to let that part inside of you know, hey, I hear you. We're working on it. The truth is, though, that there's no universal answer here. I want you to just choose whichever path feels most aligned and sustainable for you, and obviously you can always adjust if, something doesn't click down the line. And then for the married guys, I just want you to focus on rebuilding intimacy and connection without sex for at least a month if 90 days feels like too much. I mean, I still obviously recommend the 90-day reboot, but, at the very least, go a month and just focus on making that relationship better. Go on dates, talk to them, do stuff together, that sort of thing. If you're in a dead bedroom situation, improving this emotional closeness, dating your wife, stabilizing the rest of your life, that creates an awesome foundation for reigniting sexual intimacy after the reboot. So to recap, here are the 5 considerations for improving your scope while quitting porn. All right, you're going to want to aim your quarterly goals at your core emotional triggers. Okay, you're going to be reasonable rather than dramatic with life changes. You're going to reconnect with intentional, guilt-free fun. You're going to plan your free time instead of leaving it to chance. And you're going to make relationship goals work for your reboot and not against it. Okay, so that's it for this one. Hopefully you got a lot out of it. And next we'll be moving on to the final master habit. See you there. Booyah.